welcome to Commander Central episode 266, and today we're taking a look at patron supporter Jordan Henderson's Thalisse Reverent Medium Spirit Swarm deck. I'm Dana.
And I'm Max.
Max, how you doing today?
I am doing great. Just got back from dropping Ginger Joe off at the airport.
Very nice. How was Minneapolis?
It was busy. I beat rush hour by about half an hour.
I'm surprised you made it back this soon, so I'm glad to see you dodge all that traffic.
Yeah.
Well, I have a little tale I'm going to briefly tell here, and I posted on Twitter, so if anyone read my 10-post Twitter thread about this, you'll know the story in advance. So I've decided to sell out of some of my older reserve list cards, things that have gotten expensive in the last couple of years, much more than I paid for them originally, and I'm just like, I just don't want to hold on to some of this stuff. Simultaneously, I have kind of a crappy kitchen in my house currently, and I'm looking to renovate that, so those two things kind of lined up in a fortuitous way. I can get rid of some reserve list cards, I think, and I can get my kitchen redone.
Okay.
So I'm in the process of doing that, and as part of that, I've taken out a bunch of these cards and taken pictures of them front and back for the purposes of eventually selling them. And then I was just putting them in like this little plastic deck box that I was going to then put in a fire safe until the time came to sell the individual cards. As I was doing that and cleaning up things, I also, came across some foreign black border cards I've been holding on to over the years, because people sometimes just want weird things in non-English languages, particularly old stuff. Those I had set aside and thrown in a little box too, and I'm like, I might as well just sell these in one big lot to someone and get rid of them as well. Why am I holding on to them? So I laid those out, took a picture of those cards, listed it in a couple places. Somebody was interested. Actually, one of our patron supporters was interested, Tristan. And so we made a deal, and I packaged those cards up and put them in the mail Friday afternoon as I was taking my bike ride. Well, the wrinkle in all of this, one of the cards in the foreign black border collection I was selling to Tristan was a Solkanar the Swamp King, an old card from Legends. It was, I'm not even sure what language this one was in, but simultaneously, one of the old cards I was planning on selling in my kitchen renovation collection was a English Legends version of Solkanar the Swamp King. And over the course of looking at the foreign black border version and the English version and just comparing them, I just happened to put them both back on top of their respective plastic boxes. So when I shipped out the cards to Tristan last week, I inadvertently grabbed the box with all my reserve list cards in it.
Surprise, surprise.
And we're recording this on a Tuesday. So Tuesday morning, I'm cleaning up my desk, and I'm like, well, I might as well put these in the fire safe where they should have gone last week after I finished taking pictures, and realized the Solkanar the Swamp King on top of my box of reserve list cards I've been taking pictures of was not the English language version. It was the foreign black border version. So I had sent Tristan my a chunk of my reserve list collection, in other words, that I was planning on selling online. So I contacted Tristan, and he was just going to send them back to me, and I wasn't too worried beyond the fact that they were being sent in the mail without tracking or without any form of insurance or anything.
Tracking.
Yeah, because it was like the foreign black border cards were like $20 worth of cards or something. So I just put stamps on an envelope and threw them in the mail. So after panicking for a short period of time, I kind of remember, well, it's Memorial Day weekend, which means there was no mail pickup on Monday, which probably means there wasn't any on Saturday. And what are the odds they picked it up Friday afternoon or Tuesday morning? They're probably quite busy. So I'm like, let me just go see if the pickup time is posted on that mailbox. So I got on my bike and pedaled over to the college campus, and it pulled on the lid, and it shows pickup time at 2:30. And this was like 11. So I just sat there. I sat there and waited for 2.5 hours and of course the truck was on time. My concern was it would be early and or late, and it got to 2:35, like exactly when it was supposed to be there. And luckily the postal carrier was very nice. And I'm like, I put an envelope in here on Friday. Here's what it looks like. Here's the return address. Here's the send to address. Here's my ID. And she was nice enough to fish it out of the bin for me and give it to me so I could. And I had scissors and tape on me. I actually just cut it open and put Tristan's correct cards in it and resealed it and gave it back to her. But so I retrieved my little plastic box that sat there all weekend with a moat and a Bazaar of Baghdad and a guy's cradle. And I mean, I didn't know. I would have had a rough weekend knowing those were all in the mail and trying to think of a solution. Luckily, I didn't realize it until this morning, so my whole weekend wasn't ruined panicking about it.
Yeah, you're just lucky they didn't pick up on Saturday.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think they probably do most Saturdays except for like a federal holiday weekend. So I got very, very lucky. So yeah, don't do that, kids. If you're out there listening, there's definitely a lesson here, and it's don't do what I did.
That was always my biggest fear. Like when I used to do trading on like Deckbox was, you package 3 or 4 things up
Yeah.
approximately of the same amount of cards, and they probably might all have like something in common. And did I give the right person the right batch? And then you sit there and worry until they say, "Hey, thanks, I got all the cards." It's like, oh joy.
Well, in this case, luckily it was a listener and patron supporter, so it was someone that I was pretty sure it was going to be cool. But yeah,
Right.
if it's a stranger on TCG Player or something, you don't know if they're going to be like, "No, I didn't get him" or something.
Nope, they were the foreign ones.
Yeah, that's exactly what you said you sent me. So that was my exciting, adventurous day. The only bad thing to show for is I think I got a sunburn sitting there waiting for the email to show up, and I guess grand scheme of things, if that's the worst price I had to pay, I'm probably okay.
Yeah, I think you'll be okay. If you want, I'm sure we can get you some aloe for that.
I will. I'll take you up on that. All right. So should we jump into looking at Jordan's Thalisse deck here?
Let's do it.
So the first question we always ask is, what is your meta like? They say, I play with a close group of friends that have been playing Magic for about 8 years. Everyone knows the game very well and is used to spending a good amount of money on decks. Games are generally played very passively. Attacks don't happen until they are very advantageous or will knock a player out, because anyone who attacks risks angering the table, and grudges die very hard. Combos aren't super prevalent, but they do get brought out once in a while, and the power level is in the 6 to 8 range.
We also ask what the goal of the deck is, and they say the goal of the deck is to stack passive token generators. So when I play Thalisse, she can act as an anointed procession in the command zone and give me an instant board presence. From there, it's a beatdown strategy with the 10 plus flyers that I can consistently have on my board, whether that comes for creating more spirits than I lose from blockers, or making giant flyers with Cathar's Crusade.
And what are the weaknesses or areas we should focus on? Well, the deck has a Blood Artist effect sub-theme, but they're unsure how much work those effects actually get done, and if they should instead focus on making go-wide combat strategy more consistent.
And last but not least, we always ask, what are the budget limits for either a single card or all the upgrades? And they say they're willing to go over $50 per card if it's super helpful, but try not to go over that if possible. Otherwise, no overall budget limit upgrades.
Okay, so first things first, Thalisse Reverent Medium is a human cleric, a 3/4 for 5 mana, 3 white and a black. At the beginning of each end step, so not just yours, each end step, create X 1/1 white spirit creature tokens with flying, where X is the number of tokens you created this turn. So when you create tokens, she rewards you by basically creating more tokens. First things first, like we usually do, let's look at the land base, Max. What do they have here for lands?
There are 35 lands total, and one of those is a flip spell from Zendikar Rising. So we have Ancient Tomb, we have the Bright Climb Pathway, which is the black-white flip land from Zendikar Rising, a Castle Lockwane, a Command Tower, a Mirius Call, that's the spell that makes 2 angels, otherwise it is the mono-white land that can come in untapped if you pay 3 life. There's a Field of the Dead, Godless Shrine, Hall of Heliod's Generosity, Isolated Chapel, Keldhorin Outpost. This is from Alliances.
Yeah.
When it comes into play, sacrifice a plains or bury Keldhorin Outpost. It can tap to produce a white mana, and you can pay 1 and a white to put a soldier token into play. You treat it as a 1/1 white creature. There's a Marsh Flats, a Myriad Landscape. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 regular planes. They all have different art. That's why I had to actually count them out loud. There's a scrub land, a silent clearing, and then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 snow-covered plains, 4 snow-covered swamps, and 5 regular swamps. Then there's a Vault of Champions, Vault of the Archangel, and War Room.
Okay. So the mix of snow plains and snow swamps with regular swamps and regular plains is for the Field of the Dead, obviously, to generate more tokens. So that's actually that's good anywhere, but like it's really good here, especially. Yeah. What do you think of the land count? What do you think of 35 in this deck?
So when I originally was doing my notes, I thought 35 was too low.
Okay.
This deck does have an average CMC of 3.24, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then as I was thinking about it today in the car, I'm like, they say in the notes that it sounds like their games go long. No one's winning super early. Attacking is very passive, but there's not a lot of combos in their meta. So I just feel it's kind of one of those, okay, I'm ready to try to win the game type of metas where it's all through combat, but nobody attacks carelessly. So thinking that, I'm like, maybe 35 is fine, because if you aren't worried about doing something on turn 3 or turn 4 and you miss a land drop, maybe that's fine. It's a little low for my comfort range in Orzhov. I like to run 36, even 37, knowing that if I'm not running like a land tax or any of those new effects from like Commander Legends, 35 could be kind of on the low end.
Yeah, the CMC is not terrible. Actually, I say not terrible. 3-2, I'm pretty comfortable. I feel okay with that. But it's right in the edge of where I'd be okay with 35 too. But I assume they know, like, the balance has been reached. Like, I assume this deck has been played enough that it's what is required to get the job done. I'm looking at, because Joey Schultz at EDH has a Thalisse deck as well. I'm looking at Joey's. Joey's running 38 in his deck, but Joey's CMC is a little bit higher too. He's like just over 3.5. That does make a difference as well. And Joey has, look like a few more colored pips in his deck too. So like the mana requirements are a little bit steeper to fire things off. So I buy 35 works.
Okay. Is there anything you would swap in and out?
I really like Khajoran Outpost in here, actually. I've always liked I'm always kind of looking for a place to put those lands. I've never really had a perfect spot for them. I actually like that here. There's not much downside to it. I mean, yes, you immediately lose a plains of some sort, but it taps for a mana when it comes into play, and you can make you can make a soldier immediately too. I like that quite a bit. So I think this is a good deck to be running that card. The one I wasn't sure about at first was Mirrored Landscape. I think it's a little bit slow in general. However, the weird thing with Mirrored Landscape is it requires you to search up 2 basic land cards that share a land type. It doesn't say the same name. I always forget that part. Which means in this deck that does actually have a Field of the Dead, you can go grab a plains and a snow-covered plains. So, I kind of like that then. Like, it gives you a way to get 2 of your land types that you want Field of the Dead. So just having that realization has kind of turned me around on Mirrored Landscape.
Okay.
I was thinking a little bit about Great Hall of Starheim. That's the new land we got in Keldheim. It comes into play tap, but it does tap for black mana. And you can spend 2 and a black and sack it to make yourself a 4/4 white angel creature token with vigilance. That's a useful thing to have on a land just kind of in general, but in this case where it's also going to make you a spirit and interact with all the things in your deck that care about tokens, there's just not much downside to it, even if you don't use it very often, and there's pretty good upside, I think. So that's one I wouldn't mind seeing in this deck.
Yeah, I definitely was thinking about Great Hall, especially because even though you have to sack the creature with the land, you can sack a little 1/1 spirit to make a 4/4 flying vigilant angel. I mean, that just is pure upside. The Mirrored Landscape realization about Snowlands, today I learned something. Thank you.
You bet.
A couple other ones I was thinking of, I think Snowfield Sinkhole, which is the duel that enters the battlefield tapped snow duel from Kaldheim, would be fine in this deck, if I'm correct in my guess on how they're kind of slower paced games, just because that makes 2 colors of mana. It's a different name than, it'll trigger Field of the Dead, and it's kind of safe. But one thing I've been running in a lot of my decks where my commanders are like 5 mana or more is Command Beacon.
Yeah.
Especially when your deck revolves around your commander. Having Thalisse out seems very important to this deck, just to capitalize on all the token makers you have. So Command Beacon, it taps for colorless. You can sack it to put your commander into your hand from the command zone. And it's still under $4 from Commander Legends. So I mean, unless you don't want, if you get the normal frame one, it's $4. If you get the full art version, it's $7. So get them while they're still cheap, because they won't be cheap for much longer.
Absolutely. I will just mention Hall of Heliod's Generosity, too. It's not an Enchantress deck, but there are 13 enchantments in here, and quite a few of them are backbreaking. Like, if someone blows up your Anointed Procession, being able to get it back and have their spell just have, kind of gone to waste feels really good. Same with Cathar's Crusade or Divine Visitation. Even Monologue Tax or Smothering Tithe. I mean, there's just great value you can get from those cards, and being able to recur them on a land that doesn't come into play tapped. I think I have Hall in every white deck I have at this point, just because the enchantments you tend to run, even outside Enchantress decks, are almost always complete bombs.
Yeah.
So I think that card should probably see more play, and it already sees plenty of play.
And we're getting the old old frame for it in Modern Horizons too.
All right, artifacts. There's 13 artifacts here. Arcane Signet, just a great mana rock. Archaeomancer's Map, card that I feel like we're going to be mentioning in every white deck for the most part moving forward because it's so strong. Probably the best sack outlet ever printed, Ageneth's Altar. Felwar Stone as a mana rock. We have Idol of Oblivion, a way to draw cards whenever you make a token. Aketra's Monument is 3 mana, and it makes white creature spells cost 1 less. And whenever you cast a creature spell, you make a 1/1 white warrior creature token with Vigilance. That has really good synergy with your commander. Orzhov Signet, Soul Ring, and a Talisman of Hierarchy for additional mana rocks, Skull Clamp for drawing off of your tokens, a Astronic Resonator to copy Thalisse's ability or whatever else is worth copying, a Strixhaven Stadium as kind of a alt win condition in this deck, and Wayfarer's Bauble as just a rock that you can use to go get a land and self-ramp yourself with a basic.
Yeah.
Anything in particular here you want to talk about, Max?
I don't know how I like Oketra's Monument in this deck. I get that it reduces the white creature spells, but there's only, of the 19 creatures, I think 9 of them have a white pip in their casting cost.
Yeah. Yep. I just counted as well.
But the fact that you get the token off of all the creatures, I think balances it out.
Sure.
I love all the mana rocks. Having 35 lands and having, 6 mana rocks are great. And then you also have the Ashnod's Altar, which always, sacrifice something, make 2 mana. I don't know. I wouldn't really change anything about this.
Yeah, I like all of them. I'm a big fan of Idol of Oblivion in a token deck for sure. Strixhaven Stadium I have not seen actually in a game yet, but I think it's a really solid card.
I think it's a super cool card. It was one I was hyped on, during our Strixhaven review. Mm-hmm. And, we did mention that it'd be great in a token deck. I don't know how you do without green. I just default to if you have an overrun and 20 tokens out, you're going to win with that Strixhaven Stadium, or someone's going to lose. Right. In white, I think you're really relying on all your creatures having some sort of evasion, whether it's flying, being that they're spirits, or angels if they come off of Divine Visitation. So I'm guessing this card puts in a lot of work in this deck, but I would really like to hear back and see if they've gotten a chance to actually cast it and see what it does.
The one suggestion I have here, and I think it's a super strong card, and this is one, as far as suggestions go, I would strongly suggest, and that's Heraldic Banner. It's a 3-mana rock from back in Eldraine, and just taps for a mana of the chosen color that you choose when it comes into play, but the most important part here is creatures of the chosen color get +1/+0. This deck makes some black creatures, but just naming white to go with your spirits, which will also work with the angels that you may get if you have a Divine Visitation out or something, turns it from you hitting someone with 7 or 8 tokens, dealing 7 or 8 damage, to that hitting them for 14 or 16 damage. It makes a big difference. There's been a lot of games in my Talrand deck, for example, where that's just turned the tide. Or someone's been forced to remove it to keep me from winning the game, or at least killing them, in which case they've had to waste a removal spell on a mana rock, which feels just fine too. So it's just a really strong card that is worst case you're spending 3 mana for a mana rock. There's a Felwar Stone in here that may wind up only making colorless mana anyway. Worst case, you've paid 1 more mana for a Felwar Stone that's still probably going to buff your creatures in a way that's relevant. So that's one I would strongly recommend finding a home for. It's really, really good.
Yeah.
All right, what should we look at next, Max? Should we go over take a look at the enchantments? Did we mention those?
Let's rock and roll. Okay, enchantments. We have a baker's dozen, 13 enchantments. Anointed Procession, making double all the tokens. Bastion of Remembrance, which makes a dude and is a kind of a Blood Artist effect on it. Bitter Blossom, Cathar's Crusade, Court of Grace, which is from Commander Legends, where you become the Monarch, and at your upkeep, if you are the Monarch, you make the 4/4 Angel token, or you make the 1/1 Spirit. Divine Visitation, turn all your tokens into angels. Etchings of the Chosen, this was from Modern Horizons 1. It enters the battlefield, choose a creature type, creatures of the chosen type that you control get +1/+1, and then you can pay 1 and sacrifice a creature of the chosen type, and target creature you control gains indestructible until end of turn. We have Felidar Retreat, that is a landfall enchantment where you either make a 2/2 cat beast creature token or put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control, and they gain vigilance until end of turn. Intangible Virtue just buffs all your creature tokens. Monologue Tax, whenever a player casts their second spell. Whenever an opponent casts their second spell each turn, you make a treasure token. Phyrexian Arena, just for some draw. Smothering Tithe, which is, crazy awesome. And then Tombstone Stairwell. This is all the way from Mirage. Enchant World, it's 2 black with a cumulative upkeep of 1 and a black. During each upkeep, each player puts into play a tomb spawn token for each summon card in his or her graveyard. Treat these tokens as 2/2 black creatures that are unaffected by summoning sickness and count as zombies at the end of turn, or if Tombstone Stairwell leaves play, bury all these tokens. So as long as Tombstone Stairwell's in play, you get to do the thing. When it's gone, blow them all up.
Except for you keep all the Thalisse tokens that you made for those zombies coming, those tomb spawn coming into play. This card's really good in general. It is bonkers in this deck. Just nuts. Again, like, this deck is pretty tightly tuned. One card I haven't loved myself in general has been the Court Cycle from Commander Legends, Court of Grace being one. However, this is a deck where you're making a ton of tokens, many of which have flying, to defend the Monarch. Your commander makes flying tokens that make it easier to defend the Monarch. So I feel like it's probably slightly better here, but I've not had great luck with any of them because it's just hard to hold on to them, and I'm not sure if the making the 1/1 spirit or whatever bonus you're getting from those courts offsets the fact that it's really easy to lose the Monarch and be in a position where you can't get it back sometimes.
I 100% agree with you. I run Court of Grace in Dramoka, Tuvasa, and Regnan-Krav, and it just feels like a 4-mana draw spell most times.
Yeah.
Like, a board wipe happens, or someone becomes a Monarch, and it feels like a 4-mana draw spell. I just haven't had luck with them, but I haven't also cut them yet.
Yes, I'm kind of... I think as I'm making cuts right now, looking at cuts for Modern Horizons 2, a couple of the courts are coming out finally because I'm like, I've given you enough time and it just has not worked out for me.
Yeah.
But I think if any deck can make it work, it's this one where you have the ability to make a lot of flying blockers. So I would believe it's effective here, but I personally have just not had great luck. I like Fought-Out Retreat. Actually, Intangible Virtue is the one that people I think have kind of forgotten about over the years because it's been, it's kind of not as flashy as newer cards that we get. 2 mana is really efficient, and giving those creature tokens +1/+1 and Vigilance is really, really good too. Like, that's a really strong card that I think people forget about because it's not flashy.
Yeah.
And in the last one, Monologue Text has been decent whenever I've seen it. I guess it does proc Thalisse abilities on other players' turns, which is always really nice. I'm curious how and this is like less even a response to this deck and just in general, because it's not been bad, but it's also never felt necessarily amazing when I've seen it in games. I'm curious what everyone else out there has had in terms of experiences with Monologue Text. It's obviously not sponsoring Tithe, but is it good enough? I'm curious. Have you seen it at all in games, Max?
I think I saw it this weekend after you left.
Okay.
I think someone played it. I don't remember who, but I don't know. I've yet to really see it. I could be wrong about this weekend. I think it's going to be a good substitute for people who can't get Smothering Ties.
Sure. Now, one of the things Jordan asked was about the Blood Artist kind of effects. And one in the enchantments is Bastion of Remembrance. It's an enchantment. It makes a 1/1 white human soldier creature token when it comes into play, and whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent loses a life and you gain a life. So, I mean, if that's out and someone board wipes, or you happen to have the altar out and you can mass sack stuff, it probably does pretty good work. But I feel like that's almost too many variables. There's not a ton of sack outlets in this deck. So, like, there's probably enough times when you get it out and it doesn't do that much work. That's one I'm not entirely sold on here. Do you have any thoughts on that one?
I like the Blood Artist package in decks like this when you're in like a non-green token deck. The fact that Jordan's not running like Dictate Erebos or Grave Pact, I think makes it better. Maybe add another altar. Maybe add Phyrexian Altar or Altar of Dementia. The ones that are maybe somewhat easier to get your hands on. But there's also, like, you could, I didn't bring it up in lands, but you could run Westvale Abbey that makes tokens and sacrifices.
Sure, yeah.
I definitely think I would keep the Blood Artist package. I think, because there are a bunch more that aren't in this deck that will just kind of you could add instead of some of the other stuff. When we get to creatures. One
thing, and I've mentioned this card, but it's been probably 6 or 8 months since I've thrown it out there in a deck tech. I still like Righteous War in decks where your commander is black and white. I think it provides a ton of protection. It turns off Swords to Plowshares and Path to Exile and any of the good black removal spells. It makes your commander really hard to block. And in this deck, it's going to keep anyone's black flyers from blocking those spirits, and it's going to keep anyone's white flyers from blocking your Bitter Blossom tokens. And I do do think it's a really, really solid card. If someone is, if you want to try it out, Jordan, I would suggest giving it a go. You'd be surprised how often it's going to keep people from interacting with your commander. Okay, so we have one Planeswalker here in this deck. Tevish Zot, Doom of Fools. +2, you create 2/0/1 black Thrall creature tokens. So right there, that's going to proc Thalise's ability. As a +1, you can sacrifice another creature or Planeswalker, and if you do, you draw 2 cards. Then draw another card if the sacrifice permanent was a commander. Probably not going to happen too often here, but you're mostly going to be sacrificing those Thralls to draw cards. And there's a -10, you can gain control of all commanders, including ones that are in the command zone. So this is just a good token maker and a way to draw cards all in one package. I like the card. I would keep it in here. The only thing I would probably consider adding, Elspeth Sun's Champion. The fact that she just makes you 3 soldiers, which is going to in turn then make you 3 spirits. Like the value you're getting off that for 6 mana, you're making 6 tokens every time you plus her, as long as Thalisse is out. And you have the option to board wipe on her, and you're going to be able to protect her very easily, I would guess, with Thalisse out and those Thalisse tokens, in which case hitting that emblem is probably not that difficult either. I think I've seen Elspeth do really good work in Joey's Thalisse deck, and I think it would do really good work here.
Yeah.
Those are the main things for Planeswalkers I have. Why don't we look at the sorceries now, Max?
Okie dokie. So there are 7 sorceries. Austere Command, Blot Out the Sky. This is the new one from Strixhaven. It's X white black. Create X tapped 2/1 white and black inkling creature tokens with flying. If X is 6 or more, destroy all non-creature, non-land permanents. So destroy all the enchantments, artifacts, and planeswalkers. Demonic Tutor, Hour of Reckoning, which is a board wipe for 4 triple white, but it has Convoke, and it destroys all non-token creatures. Way to protect your board and blow up everything in your way.
Mm-hmm.
Increasing Devotion is a flashback spell for 3 white. You can cast it to create 5 1/1 white human creature tokens. If this were cast from a graveyard, create 10 of those, and the flashback cost is 7 white. Lingering Souls, 3 mana sorcery to create 2 1/1 white spirit creature tokens with flying, and you can flash it back for 1 and a black. And then finally, Nomad's Assembly, 4 white, put a 1/1 white core soldier creature token onto the battlefield for each creature you control, and it has Rebound. So at the beginning of your next upkeep, you can cast it from the exile without paying its mana cost.
So for sorceries, there's a couple of things here that jump out at me. First of all, this deck doesn't have a ton of draw, but it does have a few different ways to gain life. And I'm always generally a fan of drawing cards at the cost of life, even if I don't gain life. But in this case, you can gain life back, so it makes it even safer. 2 cards I think would do a ton of work here are Minions Murmurs, which is 2 black, and you draw X cards and lose X life for X's number of creatures you control. I mean, there's times you're just going to draw 10 cards, and okay, even if you're at 20 life and you're drawing 10 cards, you're going to be in a really, really good shape. Similarly, we have the new card that was in the Commander decks that just came out, which is Pact of the Serpent, which is black and 1. You choose a creature type, and target player draws X cards and loses X life, where X is the number of creatures they control of the chosen type. So you probably would name spirits here and draw, again, a handful of cards for 3 mana, and you'd lose some life, but you could probably gain it back in this deck, and even if you don't, you're going to be up so far that it might not matter. Additionally, Pact of the Serpent can be targeted, so if someone else is playing a token deck and they happen to be low, you can maybe kill them with it too. If Sign in Blood can kill people once in a while, then you can use Pact of the Serpent on occasion as well. I think they're both really good draw spells, and I think they would really shine here. And the last sorcery that kind of jumps out at me, that at least I've seen do really good work in a Thalisse deck, is Necrotic Hex. And it's expensive. It's 6 and a black. Each player sacrifices 6 creatures, and you create 6 tapped 2/2 black zombie creature tokens. That's a big ask, losing 6 creatures, but in this deck, where you're making tokens and making tokens on top of your tokens, and you may have Anointed Procession out making tokens for every token that you make when you're making tokens, hitting 6 creatures that are all pretty disposable is going to be very easy. They'll then replace themselves with the 6 zombies you make, which will then make spirits off the lease. Meanwhile, everyone else is just down 6 creatures. Like functionally, you cast it and you wind up ahead 6 creatures, and everyone else is down 6 creatures. It's just a really good spell in this particular deck, and I think it would really shine. If you get to the point where you can cast 7 mana and you've got 6 spirits out, then you just get 6 more spirits and 6 zombies, and everyone else just has an empty board state.
That's bonkers.
Yeah. So this is a perfect deck for it, and I'd like to see that one show up here. Anything from you here?
No, you covered more draw. That's pretty much all I was going to talk about.
Okay. Well, the instants here, there's 12 instants in this deck. We have a Chroma's Will, just a bonkers card that I think we saw pop up a few times
Powerhouse.
this weekend. Yeah. Anguish of Making, great removal spell. Benevolent Offering, which is 3 and a white, and you choose an opponent. You and that player each put 3 1/1 white spirit creature tokens with flying onto the battlefield. And you can also choose an opponent, and you gain 2 life for each creature you control, and that player gains 2 life for each creature they control. So, I mean, you're going to make a ton of spirits, which are going to make more spirits, and you can then gain life and give life to whoever it least matters to. I don't love this card, but I think it probably is decent in this deck. Call the Coppercoats, which I think is a really good card that should see more play. It's 2 and a white, and it has Strive for 1 and a white, so you choose any number of target opponents, and you create X 1/1 white human soldier creature tokens, where X is the number of creatures those opponents control. It's like, even if you just pick one person who has 3 creatures, making 3 tokens for 3 mana at instant speed is pretty decent. And then you're going to make 3 spirits on top of that with Thalisse. And you have the option to strive it if there's more opponents that have a handful of creatures out. And again, so say you strive it once and hit somebody else that has 3 creatures, then you make 3 spirits. So like at that point, you're spending 5 mana and making, 12 tokens. That's crazy good, and that's usually as low as it winds up getting for the most part, particularly in a meta that's supposedly pretty slow. I've cast Call the Coppercoats and made 10 creatures off one person and 8 off somebody else. In this deck, you're going to double that because you're going to get the tokens off the lease as well. So Call the Coppercoats is a super good card, and this is a perfect deck for it. We have a Generous Gift, great removal again. Ink Shield, which is just an insane card in every possible way, and it's even better here. Path to Exile, some fantastic removal. Secure the Wastes, great instant speed token maker. Zot's Will, I'll remind you guys that it's 2 modes here, and you can choose both if you control a commander. Each opponent sacks a creature they control with their greatest power, which is almost always useful. And exile all cards from all opponents' graveyards and create X01 Black Thralls, where X is the greatest power among creature cards exiled this way, which you then double those tokens off of Thalisse. So really, really good. Teferi's Protection, just to save your board state. And the last 2 are Swords to Plowshares, which is a great little piece of removal as well, and Village Rites, so a fantastic way to turn your token into couple of cards. So, Max, any thoughts about the instance we have here?
I like all of these.
Yeah.
I've yet to be able to cast an Ink Shield. I don't even think I own one, but once I have one, it's going to go right into Regnan Krav. I kind of agree with you on Benevolent Offering. I'm not a big fan of giving my opponent stuff, but, you can strategically do that where you give the person with no creatures 3 creatures, you get 3, and then you go to the person with, 20 tokens and you gain your 20 life.
Right.
Or you have 20 life and you go to the person that you just gave those 3 tokens to and give them 6 life, So that's nice. My way to fix the draw issue was Plumb the Forbidden. And this is kind of another reason why I would like to keep the Blood Artist effect in. Because Plumb the Forbidden is a 1 in a black for an instant out of Strixhaven. As an additional cost to cast this spell, you may sacrifice 1 or more creatures. When you do, copy this spell for each creature sacrificed this way. And then what happens is you draw a card and lose a life. Okay, well, if you sack 5 tokens for 2 mana, draw 5 cards, lose 5 life, that's great for 2 mana at instant speed, where Village Rites is sacrifice a creature to draw 2 cards for 1 mana. I think it's a great... Plum is just a great, cheap draw spell. And in a token deck, you could do that at your end step after the Thalisse tokens enter, cast that, then you come back into your turn with 5 more cards in your hand.
Yeah. Super, super good. And again,
I think that's what I would cut Benevolent for. I would put another draw spell in.
That would be my pick as well. It would be either that or Stinging Study, which draws you cards equal to your commander CMC. And it's going to be 5 in this case because it doesn't matter if it's in play or not. But I think that's actually a better pick. I think Plumb the Forbidden is probably even better because it's only going to cost you 2 mana too.
Right. I'm also not a big fan of Zatz's Will. I've been running it since it came out in my partner deck. So at least I have a chance of having a commander out more often than only having one commander. There have been times where I've used both modes. There's been times where I only use the second mode. And every time I cast it, it feels extremely underwhelming. But maybe I'm just having bad luck with it.
I've not ever used it, but I've had it used to pretty good effect against me.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, if it's mainly just for the exiling all the cards from graveyards, then it's worth 5 mana.
Yeah. But no, I agree. Because, I mean, it's much easier to, at 5 mana, it's also much easier to whiff than it is on something like a Chroma's Will that's almost always going to just be backbreaking, or Jessica's Will as well.
Yeah.
Okay, last but not least here, we have the Creature Suite. And there's 18 in this deck. We have a Blood Artist, we talked about a few times, a Burnished Heart, a Cruel Celebrant, so it's basically a Blood Artist effect for 2 mana. Doomed Artisan, sculptures you control can't attack or block. At the beginning of your end step, create a colorless sculpture artifact creature token with this creature's power and toughness are equal to the number of sculptures you control. So just every end step makes you a new sculpture token. Grave Titan, there's a Hanweir Militia Captain. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 4 or more creatures, you transform it, and it transforms into a Westvale Cult Leader, whose power and toughness are equal to the number of creatures you control, and at the beginning of your end step, you make a 1/1 white and black human creature token. Giselle Goldmane is a way to buff all your creatures, which is pretty useful here as kind of a win condition. You have Keeper of the Accord, way to draw, and it makes you a token, so this is a solid deck for that. Max Good Friend Krav, hanging out. Mentor the Meek, draw on a body. We have Ophiomancer, makes a token every upkeep. It'll only make them if you don't control any snakes, so you ideally probably want to have a way to get rid of those tokens or generate value off them somehow, but Ophiomancer is a really, really good card. Pitiless Plunderer, whenever another creature you control dies, you create a treasure artifact creature token. Ruthless Knave, you can spend 3 mana and sack a creature and create 2 treasure artifact creature tokens. And I guess, I don't know if we pointed this out, but Thalisse doesn't say creature token. Just says you create spirit creature tokens where X is the number of tokens you created this turn. So all it really cares about is the tokens you made. It doesn't care if they're spirits. Or, excuse me, creature tokens. We have Teysa Karlov, who, if a creature dying causes a triggered ability to trigger, it does so twice, and she also gives these creatures vigilance and lifelink, creature tokens. We have Teysa Orzhov Scion, who is the original Teysa, where you can sack 3 creatures to exile a creature, which is useful here, and whenever your black creature dies, you make a spirit creature token. So that's some pretty good value. Twilight Drover. Whenever a creature token leaves play, you put a +1 counter on Drover, and you can spend 2 and a white to remove a counter and make 2 spirit creature tokens. You have a Woe Strider, who makes goat creature tokens and lets you sack stuff to scry 1. So you have a creature, a token maker, and a sack outlet, and also has escape, so you can reuse the Woe Strider when it dies. And last, Zulaport Cutthroat, another Blood Artist kind of effect. All right, Max, what do you think of the creatures?
There's a lot going on here.
There is.
So when I was looking at the list originally, I kept getting stuck on Etchings of the Chosen and the enchantments, because do you just always choose spirits and hope you just have enough off of Thalisse? Because a lot of these creatures create non-spirits.
Yes.
Some do, some don't. So that's probably where Etchings is just, you just choose spirits and go with it. I do think you could probably tune that in a little and find more creatures that make spirit tokens. So you already are running some, but, you could also run like Geist Honored Monk. That comes in and makes 2 1/1 white spirit tokens with flying, and its power and toughness are equal to the number of creatures you control. Well, you're going to get 4 spirits if Thalisse is in play, essentially. But there's just tons of other cards, newer cards, because spirits have been getting a lot of love lately in the standard environments. I'm not really sure why the third Teysa is in here, because it's dying. So do you see anything besides like Pitiless Plunderer and like the Blood Artist effects to run the newest Teysa?
No, I think she's fine, but I think she's only fine, and I think for that reason, you don't have a ton of ways to force those procs to happen. So, I mean,
right, so
maybe it's good enough for the Exile Clause. Maybe that's enough.
Yeah, and if you do put more of a Blood Artist package in here, then it's even better.
Yeah.
You don't need the Dictates and the Grave Packs because you're getting double triggers with Teysa.
Right.
But there are some other ways I think that are better to draw that work into the Blood Artist package. So, like, Mentor the Meek is in here. Pay whenever a creature with power 2 or less enters the battlefield, you can pay 1 if you do draw a card. You're probably going to have a ton of treasures, but do you really want to be cracking all your treasures when Thalisse pops out a bunch of tokens? Probably not.
Right.
I would like to see Smothering Abomination in here.
Yeah.
It's an Eldrazi. It has flying, devoid. At the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice a creature, and then whenever a creature is sacrificed, you draw a card. So it's not just to it, but if you sacrifice something to an altar, you draw a card. It's just so good. And it's devoid, so a lot of things don't hit it.
Right.
And it's a 4/3 body. Like, that's just a good flying beater in the air.
It's one of those cards that whenever it sees play, I always feel like you have to deal with it or it's going to run away with the game.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
other Blood Artist type cards that you could put into this deck, Sir Conrad the Grim. Whenever another creature dies, or a creature card is put into the graveyard from anywhere other than the battlefield, or a creature card leaves your graveyard, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. And then you can pay 1 and a black to mill each player.
That would be good here as well. Yeah, I think the space with the most room to maneuver in this deck, because I think it's a very tuned deck, will be the creature suite. A few of these creatures I think definitely could come out.
And then this would be just an all-star in this deck. Nadier's Nightblade.
Yeah.
This was from Commander Legends. 2 and a black for a 1/3 elf. But whenever a token you control leaves the battlefield, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. And that's, again, any token. Your treasures, if you end up making clues, it's just not creatures. So I think that would be something I would slot in right away, just to have another Blood Artist effect that's going to work with your treasures as well.
Yeah, totally agree. So Elenda the Dusk Rose pops out, but she's $30 these days. I think Elenda would be very good here. The card that I've actually seen in this deck that's insanely good, that I can't recommend enough, and it's a quarter, is Maw of the Obsidat. It's 3 white-black for 3/3. Sacrifice a creature, and creatures you control get +1/+1 till end of turn.
What?
So you just sacrifice those like 3 or 4 things in the ground, maybe even Thalisse, including the Maw of the Obsidat if you need to. Give all your stuff +4/+4, +5/+5 to end of turn, all your evasive flying spirits, and just kill the table. Like, I've seen it happen in Joey's Thalisse deck more than once. It's a dirt cheap card, and it's a crazy good finisher.
What? Why am I just learning about this card?
Yeah, I mean, it probably would be good in your Regnant Croft deck as well.
Yeah.
So that's very good. We mentioned Giselle Goldmane, who has a way Giselle's ability is 3 white, and attacking creatures you control get X for end of turn, where X is the number of attacking creatures. It's a nice kind of white's version of an overrun there. You can also get that same effect on Mirror Entity. Spend X, and until end of turn, creatures you control have base power and toughness XX, and gain all creature types. You don't care about the creature types, basically. Although you might, if you have Etchings of the Chosen out, and you've named spirits, you can turn everything else into spirits too, I guess. So that's not nothing, but I mean, pump 9 mana into it and those spirits become 9/9. It's a really good closer, and I would highly recommend that in this deck as well. And the last one here would be Endrick Sar, Master Breeder. Whenever you cast a creature spell, put X 1/1 black throw creature tokens into play, where X is a spell's converted mana cost. So you're probably going to cast 2 creature spells before you make enough throws to worry about Endrick Sar dying. And who cares, because at that point, you're putting 7 throws out, and you've made 7 spirits off the least probably, so you're up 14 tokens for having spent 5 mana on Endrick Sar. That's just a ton of value, and that's assuming you don't have like an altar or something out where you're sacking them, or a Obsidat or Maw of the Obsidat. Play Endrick Sar first, then play Maw of the Obsidat, and make 5 Thrall tokens, and then sack them all to Maw to give your stuff +5/+5, then you're back to 0 Thralls for next time you cast a creature spell. So that one is nuts in this kind of deck as well.
And you're totally missing the magical Christmas land of Endrick Sar and Divine Visitation.
Right, yeah, right. So that at that point, you don't care, just because they're all turning into angels. Absolutely, yeah, for sure. So those would be the cards I would recommend here. I think the creature package here is one that probably has the most room to tweak a few things. Like Ophiomancer is a great card, and it's going to generate pretty good value. But Ophiomancer compared to Elenda, or compared to Maw the Obsidat, or compared to Mirror Entity, those 3 cards are like going to win games, and Ophiomancer is not going to win you a game.
Yeah.
So like that's what I would look to make those moves, is to take out a few of those cards that are good. Like, I love Ophiomancer, but it's not going to win a game when a couple of these are. That Taste of Ors Outside is probably not going to win a game unless you find out that maybe the removal is not necessary. I'm not sure, but I don't think it is in this deck. There's plenty of targeted removal. I feel like replacing that with one of the creatures we talked about that's a game winner is going to make it even easier to close things out.
Yeah.
Final thoughts here, Max?
I think this is a really cool deck. I think it's a deck that's been around for a while, and there's a lot of love you can see in the list.
Yeah.
And, adding the Blood Artist package or not adding it and just building more of a board state, I think is kind of dependent on who you play with. And it sounds like you have a very sound play group. So, maybe changing it up will throw them for a loop, and, might be something good, might be something bad. But I really like looking at this list. The only really other Thalisse deck I've seen is Joey Schultz's, and that just wrecks house. So it's cool to see other people's interpretations on the commander.
Yeah, what I like about you mentioned how it looks like it's been played with and seen a lot of love, but this commander's only 5-6 months old at this point. But the deck
6 months old, yeah.
But the deck doesn't feel 6 months old. This deck feels like it's a deck that someone's been tinkering with for 2 or 3 years.
Right.
Which is neat to see. Like, that means this is a deck that Jordan's been tweaking and playing with, and I love decks that feel like it's been someone's pet project. So, very cool. Jordan, thank you very much for sharing your deck with us, and thanks for supporting us on Patreon. It means a lot. It's a big deal. Thanks to everyone out there who supports us, whether it's through Patreon or just listening to the show and giving us a rating on your podcast app of choice. It's a big deal, and thank you. It means a lot. We will be back on next week with another show. I'm Dana. You can find me on the Twitter birds at Dana Roach. You can find Max at CMDR_Max. And you can find Chris at WiseSquishy1. Our podcast theme is Retro Future Dirty by Kevin MacLeod. And our show is edited by Rafael Garcia, who you can find at Ursa Bearwalker. Until next Monday, I'm Dana.
And I'm Max.